Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. The last few videos on my channel have been talking about tanking Twin Emperors as a warlock in Classic WoW. I made a video prior to the release of AQ40 talking about different specs you could play. I made a video talking about shadow resistance gear. And then after my first kill, I made a video showcasing that kill and talking about a little bit about strategy, what went well, what didn't go well, and all that. This video is taking place after 3 kills. So this is week 3 of AQ40. And having done the fight a few times, I want to talk about a bit about strategy. And then the bulk of this video is going to be talking about kind of a follow-up of my specs and gear video. I'm going to talk about what spec and what gear I played for each kill, because they're all 3 are different. And where I found the most success and where I found the spec or gear setup was not ideal. So just quickly, a very brief synopsis of the fight is as follows. So this warlock here on the left, this is me. I'm the warlock in my guild who is pulling the caster mob to initiate the fight. So prior to my first kill, my game plan was to walk up as close as I can before aggroing the mob. And then as the timer's going down, like 7, 6, 5, 4, to pre-cast a Soulfire, because that's my hardest hitting spell, and then next global like Curse of Elements, and then spam Searing Pain, then move back slowly, and maintain some threat. My goal was to get the mob like right around here, and then once the boss transitions and it's the warrior's turn, he will move in and then pull the boss back to where he's ultimately going to be killed, which is right in front of this torch. However, that is not exactly what happened. During my first kill, I was getting into position to attempt to precast. However, I just face-pulled the boss before I was able to start casting. So I decided ditch the Soulfire, just start spamming Searing Pain, and then move it back. Everything went fine. But I was kind of thinking to myself after the fact, why wasn't I able to precast? And I thought it was because I was playing Soul Link and I did not have the Destructive Reach talent in Destruction to give me 20% range. So I was thinking, oh, if I play like DS Emberstorm and I have that range, I should be able to precast more successfully. I will try that in future weeks. But spoiler alert, that did not work either. During my second kill, I played MD Ruin, and I knew I did not have the range to precast because I failed to do so the previous week. So I just ran up and started casting Searing Pain, move the boss back, and then, take it from there. But then, and that went just fine as well. But then during week 3, the most recent kill, I was playing DS Emberstorm that does have Destructive Reach. So I was thinking now I should be able to precast. However, I still was unable to do so. So if you have any dreams of precasting to get a big spike of damage right when the pull starts, keep dreaming, because it's not going to happen. Apparently the boss's aggro radius must be like 37 yards, whereas our range is 36. It's not possible. But either way, spamming Searing Pain, Shadow Burn on movement and position the boss, and then from there, you're swapping with the warrior as the mob swap. Basically it. If you really want to min-max, what our guild started doing on the second kill is that the second warlock tank was actually over here with me. And right when the fight starts, he's casting Curse of Elements so that I don't have to spend the global on doing that. I just start spamming Searing Pain. So if you're really trying to min-max, the second warlock tank, really, there's no reason for him to be over here during the initial pull. So he might as well be over here and throw up a Curse of Elements for you to increase that fire damage and save you the global. But if you want a more detailed description of the fights, my video, the most recent video on my channel actually is like showing the VOD of me killing the boss. But I just wanted to briefly go over the fight to start this video because I talked in the previous videos about precasting, and in an ideal world we would do that, but it's just not possible. The boss will aggro onto you before you're able to start casting, just by his aggro radius. Wow. Okay, it disappeared, but that was pretty much done with that anyways. Now let's get into like the talents and gear. So I kind of briefly mentioned already that I played 3 different specs and I had 3 different gear sets, and I want to talk about each one and my findings, having played all 3, which ones I feel are the best. So during my first kill, my goal was to not die. I wanted to make sure we had a smooth kill, we didn't wipe, lose everyone's world buffs. If the mages have to hold it back on threat, it is what it is. But my goal was to certainly not die. So I decided to play Soul Link. This is the spec, pretty much. All these points in Demonology, pretty much you just want Soul Link and Master Demonologist, giving you that Shadow Res, and then also splitting damage with your pet, 30% of it. Plus Soul Link gives you 3% damage, which is kind of nice. Then the rest of your talents are in Destruction. Basically, you want like the 5% crit from Devastation and the crit from Searing Pain. And then the gear that I went into my first kill with is as follows. If you want a more detailed description of my gear choices and why I made them, I recommend you watch my video talking about Shadow Resistance gear for AQ40. But I'm just going to briefly go over it in this video. Not in depth, but basically I wore a Tier 2 helm, a Shadow Resistance neck, Tier 1 shoulders, Shadow Resistance cloak, Tier 2 chest, bracers, gloves, belt, Tier 1 legs, Tier 1 boots, 2 Shadow Res rings, 1 Shadow Res trinket, and a toe-up. Then for the weapons I had a rank 14 main hand, a Shadow Resistance offhand, and a Shadow Resistance wand. Notable set bonuses is that I had the 5 set for Tier 2. So the 3 set giving me spell damage, then the 5 set giving me this, your pet gains 20 stamina and 130 res, all schools. I did some testing, and the resistance on your Fell Hunter does not affect how much damage they take via Soul Link. You might think that maybe it would because you're taking all shadow damage, and maybe Soul Link is considered shadow damage. But I tested it out and it does not matter. However, if you're playing Soul Link, the 5 set is not worthless because 20 stamina on your Fell Hunter is pretty nice. Because your Fell Hunter is taking 30% of your damage. And your Fell Hunter just inherently has way less health than you. Like 3.5k, whereas you're probably like 10 or 11k. If you're like full world buffed and all that. So 20 stam on your Fell Hunter is valuable. So I would say the 5 set is still possibly worth going for if you're playing Soul Link. However, keep in mind that the resistance does not matter at all. With this gear setup, and with Priest buff, the Shadow Resistance buff, I was at 305 Shadow Res. You can ignore the 185 you see on my character here. That's because I took this screenshot. I was like SM Rune spec. And I didn't have Priest buff. So when I have Priest buff and I actually have like Master Demonologist, you will be at 305 Shadow Res. And keep in mind also I'm an Orc, so if you're an Undead Warlock, you'll be a hard cap. You'll be at 315 because Undeads have 10 Shadow Res. And I decided to use Flask of Titans as opposed to Supreme Power because, like I said, my focus was to just make sure I did not die. And I did that successfully. However, I noticed that one concern you may have with playing Soul Link is, well, what if your Fell Hunter dies? Well, for one, you have Feldom, so you can just resummon it. 2, while you're not tanking, if your Fell Hunter somehow dies, you could just resummon another one. Like, while the warrior's tanking, you're kind of just AFK anyways. You can just hard cast another Fell Hunter. And 3, the Fell Hunter really is not difficult to keep alive. Just from the Soul Link damage, I instructed our healers, I said, just 1 priest and 1 druid, just keep renew and rejuve on my Fell Hunter, and that should be enough. And it was. They never had to like hard cast the heal onto my Fell Hunter. They just kept those hots on my Fel Hunter, and that was more than enough to keep it up. The damage your Fel Hunter takes really is not that much. And then that pretty much just means I take 30% less damage just for them having to keep a couple hots on my Fel Hunter. I was very survivable with this spec and with this gear. To the point where every healer in our raid could have probably disconnected and I would have still possibly lived during the entire tank encounter and then just like bandaged up when I wasn't tanking. Like, seriously, I took so little damage while playing Soul Link with 305 Shadow Res. But my threat was quite low. The mages had to really hold back. On my first kill, we had one death, and it was because a mage pulled aggro. Because my threat was not very high as Soul Link with Shadow Res gear. So I decided for my second kill to change things up. So for my second kill, I played MD Ruin. You may notice that every single talent point is exactly the same, except for one. And that is I removed the talent from Soul Link, and then just put it into Ruin. Ruin giving you the double bonus damage on crits really did help with the threat. I also did make some slight changes to my gear. The highlighted pieces are what I changed. So I decided to swap my tier 2 chest and tier 2 gloves for rank 13 and rank 12 chest and gloves. And then also my shadow resistance offhand, I decided to just make a rank 14 offhand for the stam and spell power, as opposed to Chen Shadow Res. You'll notice that I had less Shadow Res this week. I was at 305 the previous week. Now I'm at 285. That is because I was losing 10 Shadow Res from swapping my offhand. And then the tier 2 gloves have 10 Shadow Res. So I lost 10 Shadow Res there. And then the reason I made this swap is because I wanted to get the 20 stam 2 set for Epic PvP gear. Also, the Epic PvP gloves have an equip bonus that reduces the pushback on Searing Pain. And I mentioned in my gearing video that I thought that that was valuable because that would allow you to cast more Searing Pains because you're getting less pushback from the Shadow Bolts. And I thought that that was quite valuable. However, I noticed from doing some VOD reviews that the Shadow Bolts that the boss is casting upon you actually does not incur pushback anyways. So that is not helpful. However, I do think that the rank 13 and rank 12 chest and gloves is still a pretty good set, just in that 20 stamina is nice. Plus the rank 12 gloves are still pretty good. They have like 20 stam and 30 damage. Maybe not itemized quite as well as the tier 2 gloves, because the tier 2 gloves have crit and I also like Shadow Res. But I do really like getting the 20 stamina 2 set. I noticed on this kill that my threat was a lot better simply by changing that one talent point from Soul Link to Ruin. We had no mages die during that kill. And I asked them if they really had to hold back on threat. They said we kind of just had to watch it a little bit, but it really wasn't a problem. Basically, they just like had to make sure they dropped their ignites before the teleport. But they never pulled threat, and I was able to hold threat pretty well, but the mages were kind of climbing on threat a bit. So for that reason, I swapped my spec again. Oh, also one more thing I want to mention is that I decided to go with Flask of Supreme Power instead of Flask of Titans for my second kill because I was so tanky during my first kill that I realized, I don't really need to be using Titan's Flask. But overall, this kill was I would say, overall, MD Ruin is a better spec than Soul Link in that I was still pretty easy to keep alive. I asked the healers how it was healing me, and they said, last week we didn't even really have to heal you at all. This week we actually had to cast our spells, but it was still quite easy to keep you up. So for that reason, I swapped things up again. So for my most recent and for my third kill, I went with DS Emberstorm. Now this spec, you're missing out on Master Demonologist, which gives you 60 Shadow Res from your Fell Hunter. But you're gaining a lot more threat in that you're using Demonic Sacrifice Imp, so that's 15% fire damage. Then also you get more points in destruction, particularly you are getting Ember Storm, which is 10% fire damage. And then also Destructive Reach, which I thought would help me with pre-casting, like pre-pull, but it did not. And then I did make one gear swap. From the previous week where I played MD Ruin, I decided to change my Toep to another Shadow Resistance trinket. Because I'm losing 60 Shadow Res from not playing a spec with Master Demonologist, I decided it might be worthwhile to get 20 of that 60 back by sacrificing my Toep for a second Shadow Reflector. What did I notice for my third kill? Well, I noticed that my threat was way better. The mages didn't even have to drop their ignites. Both me and the other warlock were both playing this spec, this DS Ember Storm, and our threat was very good. Very good threat. Even with Shadow Res gear, like you'll notice my gear, I have like no hit. If I had a full BWL ZG Bis, I would be using Nel's Tier and ZG Offhand for at least to get like 3% hit. And possibly Braces of Arcane Accuracy for another 1%, but I don't have any of those items, unfortunately. But even with no hit, just the amount of damage, the amount of threat you get from one good Searing Pain crit is definitely notable. The mages in my guild did not have to hold back at all. And then I asked the healers afterwards how it felt healing me, because I am only at 245 Shadow Res, whereas the previous week I was at 285. And they said, yeah, last week it was a little bit easier to keep you up, but even you playing DS Ember Storm, it really was not a problem. And I reviewed the VOD of my kill, and my health never really dipped low at all. So overall, my findings are that DS Ember Storm is the best spec overall. Just threat is very important for a tank, and this spec provides the most threat. Keep in mind, you do need to wear Shadow Resistance gear if you're playing this spec, because you don't have Master Demonologist. But from what I've noticed, if you have 245, that's enough. You could probably go even lower, which I will experiment with during further weeks. As I get more kills, I may try to take a little bit of Shadow Res off. But for now, I've noticed that 245 is enough. And then when I am fully world buffed and using all my consumables, I'm pushing 10,000 health with this gear, which is enough. At least according to my healers in my guild, me at like 10,000 health and 245 Shadow Res, it was not difficult to keep me up. And don't forget, if you are undead, you have 10 more, so that's good. But I just wanted to make this video, now that I have a few kills under my belt, what my findings are, in that I played 3 different specs for the first 3 weeks, and overall I would say the best is DS Ember Storm, followed by MD Ruin, and then overall Soul Link I would say was the worst. I was super tanky. My Fell Hunter never even got close to dying. I never even got close to dying. But the threat really was not there. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video, follow up now that I have a bit of experience. And that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.